so much of what is happening right now in Trump land is such a backlash to Biden. It's amazing. All Joe Biden had to do was be normal, and he couldn't do it. He just couldn't do it because the Democratic Party has not been normal for quite a while. They've not been normal on issues of race. They've not been normal on issues of sex. They've not been normal on issues of economics, and they've not been normal on issues of the border, where now President Trump is about to use massive executive power in order to crack down on illegal immigration. According to Axios, President-elect Trump confirmed on Monday he is planning to declare a national emergency and use the U.S. military to carry out mass deportations. Apparently, Tom Fitton, president of Judicial Watch, posted on Truth Social earlier this month that Trump was, quote, prepared to declare a national emergency and will use military assets to reverse the Biden invasion through a mass deportation program. Trump then reposted Fitton's comment on Monday on Truth Social with the caption, true. So again, not a giant shock there, considering that he's already tapped Tom Homan, the bulldog, who is the former acting head of ICE, to serve as his border czar. And of course, he has Kristi Noem, who is about to crack down on illegal immigration as well for Department of Homeland Security. Apparently, the president-elect's team is aiming to craft executive orders that can withstand legal challenges to avoid a similar defeat that befell Trump's Muslim ban in his first term, according to Politico. Their plans also include ending the parole program for undocumented immigrants from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela, per Politico. And before there's a lot of hue and outcry about the use of a national emergency declaration in order to achieve executive power on all this, Congress could theoretically seize back its power by changing the National Emergencies Act from 1976. But the reality is the National Emergencies Act, which gives the president the ability to declare a national emergency under a wide variety of circumstances, has been used repeatedly, often, constantly, actually, by a wide variety of presidents up to and including Joe Biden, who used it most recently, for example, in February of 2024 to crack down, supposedly, on West Bank settler violence, right in the middle of the war against Hamas and against Hezbollah. It was Joe Biden who used a national emergency declaration to crack down on people giving money, as we'll talk about a little bit later in the show, to people who are actually just building homes in Judea and Samaria. Right? That was a national emergency, according to Joe Biden. So, suffice it to say, that's not actually a national emergency. You know what actually is kind of a national emergency? A giant, wide open border that has allowed in 10 million illegal immigrants over the course of the last 4 years. That is more of a national emergency. And again, Democrats are trapped here because they've spent so long on this idea that it is absolutely bigoted to point out the open border that they're kind of stuck. I'm not sure where they go from here. So, for example, here is Democratic Representative Garcia, who won't answer if criminal illegal immigrants ought to even be deported.
It's going to cost a lot of money. Estimates say $88 billion to just process and deport 1 million people. Do the math. How is he going to pay for it?
What do you want to happen then to the millions of people that are here? Do you support people who are here illegally that have committed crimes in the past few years? Do you support them being deported?
I support treating all of God's children with dignity and respect.
Okay, that is not an answer. And treating God's children with dignity and respect, it seems to me if you want to treat American citizens with dignity and respect, you ought to deport criminal illegal immigrants. That's Representative Sylvia Garcia, who represents Texas's 29th congressional district. She's not alone, by the way. Boston Mayor Michelle Wu, who is absolutely awful. She says that Democrats are going to work to avoid complying with deportation notices in the city of Boston.
What will Boston's response be if these mass deportations take place?
Yeah, look, elections have consequences, and the federal government is responsible for a certain set of actions, and cities, no individual city can reverse or override some parts of that. But what we can do is make sure that we are doing our part to protect our residents in every possible way, that we are not cooperating with those efforts that actually threaten the safety of everyone by causing widespread fear and having large-scale economic impact.
Michelle Wu, awful mayor. And just another reason why, if there are illegal immigrants in the state of Texas or in the state of Florida or in the state of Arizona, they should immediately be given bus tickets to Boston, where they can be safe with Mayor Michelle Wu. Now, again, this is one of the approaches Democrats across the country are taking to Donald Trump. They have to choose between conciliation and pragmatism and the resistance. But the problem is they've been in resistance mode for full on a decade at this point, which is why the Washington Post reports today that California is going to lead a Trump resistance again. Well, I noticed that the last time they led a Trump resistance, literally hundreds of thousands of people fled the state because it was so badly run. I know, because I was one of them and I took my family and my company with me. But according to the Washington Post, within hours of Donald Trump's victory this month, California's top elected officials readied themselves to reprise familiar roles as leaders of the Democratic resistance. Governor Gavin Newsom called a special session of the state legislature to discuss the best ways of Trump-proofing California and traveled to Washington to ask for President Joe Biden's help. Attorney General Rob Bonta held a news conference in front of the Golden Gate Bridge to declare, quote, "If Trump attacks your rights, I will be there." And Democratic lawmakers at every level of government here issued statements assuring residents they'll fight hard against any federal incursions. By the way, that obviously includes immigration. According to the LA Times, immigration is an area of likely conflict, as Trump's promised mass deportation could wreak havoc in California, home to an estimated 1.8 million unauthorized immigrants. Many Californians live in mixed status families. The state's agricultural industry relies on a largely undocumented workforce. So, we'll see if that works out well for Democrats. Again, it turns out that actually Trump's immigration program is one of the most popular parts of his agenda. That is also part of a broader anti-immigration sentiment that is growing across the world, particularly in the West. The major problem of human migration that has plagued the West for years at this point, the attempt to wash over national borders, is having tremendous consequences across the world. The entire article in the New York Times today, quote, "On migration, Europe warms to ideas once seen as fringe." Europe has been struggling for years to limit the number of unauthorized migrants entering by land and sea, instituting increasingly tough policies. Those moves now appear to be working, with the number of migrants crossing into the EU decreasing dramatically from highs last year. As in the United States, the steep drop in border crossings has done little to diminish the political potency of the issue. In Italy, Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni is trying to send migrants rescued in the Mediterranean to Albania. Germany has extended patrols to all of its land borders. Poland plans to introduce legislation to temporarily suspend the right of new arrivals to ask for asylum. None of this is a giant shock, considering, again, that a huge percentage of people who are coming across Europe's borders have very little in common with Western European values. These are major issues. And I think one of the things that we are seeing globally is that the left-wing agenda, which sounds sometimes nice, it sounds empathetic in theory, the actual material consequences of those theories are quite ugly. And when they materialize, people do not like them on a very real level. That's true whether you're talking about defund the police sorts of policies in America's major cities, which are turning increasingly red, or whether you're talking about the idea that vast migration over national borders is somehow an act of empathy that betters everyone's life, which is certainly not true in Europe, where you now have huge percentages of Muslim migrants and a huge problem with Muslim migrants involved in crime, involved in welfare policies, and involved in rioting or even pogroms in places like Amsterdam. It turns out that international leftism is a really bad program for governing. And that's how you get Trump.